Let's go ahead and bring in the great Sean Hannity. Sean, we ended the network yesterday together, and we're waking up this morning. I want to get your initial reaction, but I want to pick up where Dana left off. And that is, one thing I remember about the vice president is that he warned our country about the threat of radical Islamic terrorism. And there seems to be this pervasive nature of that growing back in our country again. What would he say right now?
You know, LJ, by the way, good morning, guys. I thought Dana's analysis was spot on, as always. And, you know, there was a period in my life I was very, very close to Vice President Cheney. And he really was an old school Cold War warrior. And, you know, not just, 9 months into the presidency of George W. Bush, America was on a war footing with the worst attack on American soil ever, and in one day we lost 2,977 of our fellow Americans, and it literally transformed their presidency. You know, recently I ran into Andy Card, and we went over in great specificity and detail everything we both remembered about that day. And when George W. Bush was talking to a bunch of young school kids, and Andy had to whisper in Bush's ear that a second tower was hit and that we're under attack, that changed the world. He told me the whole story about, we went over the story when Bush got on a pile of rubble and, you know, pulled out that bullhorn and said, and soon the entire world will hear from us. That was a moment for Dick Cheney. His entire life had prepared him for that moment because he was back in D.C. and at one point even evacuated, you know, into a bunker that, you know, was deep beneath the White House, and it was just a scary time. 2 towers hit, the Pentagon hit, a field in Pennsylvania, plane goes down. It was an unbelievable day, and America from that moment forward was on a war footing against radical Islamists. To your point, LJ, and you know the evolution of modern weaponry. And remember, he was previously a defense secretary, 2 stints. He understood the defense industry, but at that time we did not have modern, sophisticated weaponry like we do today, and that's why I always talk about the next generation of warfare. So they were dealing with very different capabilities for America at that time than the options we now have available, and then the next generation of weaponry that we're building out now. And so they had to rise to the moment. And, you know, you can have people forever debate and criticize decisions that they might have made at the time or mistakes or, you know, the surge that became a big deal and a big debate in the country. But I will tell you this, you know, he bled keeping America free through and through. And it was his passion, and he lived it. He was a serious, you know, a defender of our country and our nation. And, you know, there were a lot of anecdotal stories I can tell you. I knew him pretty well. I remember once going to Wyoming, and, you know, he was a walking modern-day medical miracle. I can tell you that part. His first heart attack was in his 30s, and obviously leading to a heart transplant. During that transition time, when I was in Wyoming with him, we went fly fishing, which I'd never done before, and I was terrible at. And we did it with a number of soldiers that had been suffering from PTSD. It was called Rivers of Recovery. And to spend that time with those people, and he dedicated that time with those people, you know, told me a lot about him. And I remember at one point, you know, he had a heart machine on him, and then pulls it out as a joke, and it goes beep 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 beep. You know, like wake up. You know, you can't disconnect his heart machine. And he was able to just stay throughout his life one step ahead with medical advancement to keep him alive. I mean, again, his first heart attack was in his 30s, and here he is at 84, and all credit to the advancement of modern medicine and his commitment to stay healthy and all of that. It was a very challenging, difficult time in those post 9/11 years. And, you know, to Lawrence's point, we still have to deal with radical Islamists. And, you know, maybe a point of debate that is going on in the country right now, and maybe this is a moment to talk about it, because the entire, I would argue, presidency of George W. Bush and Vice President Dick Cheney revolved around radical Islamists.
That's right.
And, you know, we have them today. And, you know, if you look at Hamas and their charter, it calls for the destruction of Israel. If you look at Iran, you know, trying to build hegemony in the region and become a nuclear power, and Donald Trump stopping it, it is relevant today. You know, they say death to Israel, they say death to America. If you look at over the last decades, hundreds of thousands of rockets fired into Israel, culminating on October 7th, where a country of less than 10 million people, Israel, is hit with, you know, what ultimately is hundreds of thousands of rockets over time, and then culminating in the death of 1,500 Israelis. Okay, it's not 2,977, but it would be the equivalent, their population versus ours, of 40,000 dead Americans in a day, then people kidnapped and raped and tortured, and beheadings that took place. I've seen the videos myself. The IDF showed me them. It is evil in our time. And we still have an intramural debate on the issue of whether Israel has a right to defend itself, which I find rather breathtaking. What part of murder, rape, torture, kidnapping, beheading, you know, do some people not understand? But, you know, I just stand by my principles that radical Islamic extremism is very real. One of the boldest moves in our lifetime was President Trump taking out those sites. In President Bush's time and Vice President Cheney's time, they had to take a stand. And they took that stand. They took that position. America, you know, for the first time really since Pearl Harbor, had to be on a war footing. And all credit to them for recognizing the evil that had to be dealt with. You know, the 9/11 Commission report came back and it said they were at war with us. We were not at war with them. We were not on a war footing, and we missed every sign, every indication of what had happened. You know, today's election day. Mamdani literally was proud to take a picture with an imam that was a character witness for the blind sheikh who was involved in the 93 Trade Center bombing, prosecuted by Andy McCarthy and found guilty. And that, you know, there's a lot on the ballot in New York City today. But in memory of him, he spent his entire career, for the most part, in public service. He believed in America. He understood that America had enemies. He did grow up with more of a Cold War mindset mentality. That entire paradigm has shifted and changed under President Trump. But for his time, they did the best they could, and honestly were effective in their own way, not running a perfect war, not having the benefit of modern weaponry that we have today.
Sean, thanks so much. Appreciate the perspective. I know you'll be talking about that on the radio, as throughout the day on the channel and on your show tonight. Even though
great coverage, guys.
Yeah, we have elections.
Even though he turned on President Trump, you know,
he was defending his daughter.
You have to honor his sacrifice to the country.
Yeah, he defended his daughter. You can totally understand that. They were at loggerheads.
Totally.
Yep.
I get
Thanks,
it.
Sean.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.